Quaid-e-Azam Memorial Lectures. In this series of fortnightly broadcasts, we bring you the third talk on the ideology of Pakistan by Dr. Javed Iqbal. It will be followed by a question and answer session.
Ideology of a nation always reflects the state of a people's mind, their emotions, hopes, aspirations, ideals or objectives, and a subsisting will to realize them. The worth of any ideology depends on the extent of a people's dedication to it and not on its rational or scientific demonstration. Therefore, it is not logic but sympathy that is required for properly understanding the ideology of any people. Pakistan claims itself to be an ideological state because it is founded on Islam. It came into being because Muslims of the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent developed a specific attitude of mind, an attitude which was determined by a consciousness of certain principles or objectives which they felt must be realized. It is obvious that the people of Pakistan descend from different racial stock, speak different languages, and live in geographically non-contiguous territories. The foundations of this state, therefore, could not possibly be laid on such principles as common race, common language, and contiguousness of territory. On these principles, there exist numerous groups of people such as Bengalis, Punjabis, Sindhis, Pathans, and Balochis within Pakistan. The requirements of what is called nationalism in the West are matters in Pakistan merely of sympathetically understanding regional aspirations and equitably adjusting the demands for regional autonomy in accordance with the will of the people of several units constituting the federated center. The real factor which sustains the state of Pakistan is the existence of a consciousness among the people of belonging to each other because a large majority of them adheres to a common spiritual aspiration, Islam, faith in Islam. It is for this reason that Quaid-e-Azam proclaimed at a public meeting in Dhaka held on 21st March 1948, Islam has taught us this, and I think you will agree with me, for whatever else you may be and whatever you are a Muslim. You belong to a nation now. You have carved out a territory, vast territory. It's all yours. It does not belong to a Punjabi or a Sindhi or a Pathan or a Bengali. It is yours. Consequently, the basis of nationhood in Pakistan is Islam. Islam acted as a nation-building force long before the establishment of Pakistan. Muslims gradually developed a national consciousness in the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent. They collectively struggled for the right of self-determination and the establishment of an independent homeland to be carved out from those territories where they constituted majorities. They eventually secured what they wanted. Hence, the historical fact which could not be denied is that the formation of the Muslim nation preceded the demand for a homeland. Pakistan by herself did not give birth to any nation. On the contrary, the Muslim nation struggled for and brought Pakistan into being. Therefore, Pakistan is not the cause of any kind of nationhood. She is only an effect, a result, or a fruit of the struggle of the Muslim nation for territorial specification. Of course, we may now claim ourselves to be Pakistanis or belonging to the Pakistani nation, but strictly speaking, this is only for the purpose of distinction or identification among other nations of the world. Pakistani nationhood is not the real basis for the unity of the state in Pakistan. It is merely an apparent basis. At the present stage of our development as a nation, it is not a primary but only a secondary consideration. The primary being Islam, which cements us as a nation and also provides the basis for the unity of the state. The same can be said respecting patriotism, laying down one's life for one's country. Muslims do not have a notion of Pakistan as fatherland or motherland. They do not believe in worshipping the geographical features of a country called Pakistan. They are not prepared to lay down their lives merely for Pakistan's dust, trees, deserts, mountains, or rivers. This form of patriotism, according to them, is idolatrous. But in their own native soil, Muslims are ready and willing to lay down their lives for the religio-cultural principles on which the state of Pakistan is founded. Quaid-e-Azam clearly illustrated these principles when he addressed the officers and men of the 5th Heavy Ekek and 6th Light Ekek regiments in Malir on 21st February 1948. He said, "Now you have to stand guard over the development and maintenance of Islamic democracy, Islamic social justice, and the equality of man in your own native soil. You will have to be alert, very alert, for the time for relaxation is not yet there." Quaid-e-Azam was dedicated to the ideals of liberty and freedom. These ideals had precedence over everything else. Therefore, he was a firm believer in strong defense, which he regarded as a bulwark against aggression and therefore a service to the cause of peace. Addressing the establishment of HMPS Dilawar on 23rd January 1948, he said, "While giving the fullest support to the principles of the United Nations Charter, we cannot afford to neglect our defenses. However strong the United Nations organization might be, the primary responsibility for the defense of our country will rest with us, and Pakistan must be prepared for all eventualities and dangers. The weak and the defenseless in this imperfect world invite aggression from others. The best way in which we can serve the cause of peace is by removing the temptation from the path of those who think that we are weak and therefore they can bully or attack us. That temptation can only be removed if we make ourselves so strong that nobody dare entertain any aggressive designs against us. You will have to make up for the smallness of your size by your courage and selfless devotion to duty, for it is not life that matters, but the courage and determination you bring to it." Hence, the first principle of the ideology of Pakistan, as laid down by Quaid-e-Azam, is that for Pakistanis, Islam is the basis for their nationalism as well as patriotism. Pakistan is an ideological state, for it claims itself to be Islamic. It is not a theocratic state, because Islam is essentially a polity and aspires to create a civil society. This point was explained by Quaid-e-Azam in his broadcast on 19th February 1948, when he proclaimed, "Make no mistake, Pakistan is not a theocracy or anything like it. Islam demands from us the tolerance of other creeds, and we welcome in closest association with us all those who, of whatever creed, are themselves willing and ready to play their part as true and loyal citizens of Pakistan." Islam does not recognize the distinction between the spiritual and the profane. According to Islam, the spiritual and temporal obligations are not only connected with each other, but it is incumbent on every Muslim to constantly endeavor to realize the spiritual values while performing his temporal obligations. Hence, secularism is an integral part of Islam, and it is for this reason that the Islamic state assimilates the qualities of an ideal secular state. In the positive sense, a secular state means a state which guarantees religious freedom to every citizen and which, without distinction of religion or race, endeavors to promote the material advancement and welfare of all its citizens. The Islamic State of Pakistan, as envisaged by Quaid-e-Azam, embraces the qualities of an ideal secular state. In this state, every citizen is granted the right of religious freedom. Sunnis, Shias, Wahhabis, and other sects of Islam, Hindus, Christians, Parsis, and their numerous sects are free to profess their respective personal faiths and be governed by their respective personal codes of law. Islamic theology recognizes a distinction of meanings in the words mazhab and deen. Mazhab means personal faith, viewpoint, or path, whereas deen means a body of those universal principles of Islam which are applicable to the entire humanity. Therefore, in this sense, the state of Pakistan does not have any specific mazhab because it is neither founded nor project the personal viewpoint of any particular Islamic sect. But like an ideal secular state, to promote the material advancement and welfare of all its citizens without distinction of religion or race is one of its numerous duties. Thus, in the political sense, irrespective of their religion or race, all Pakistanis are citizens of the state of Pakistan on equal terms. This very important aspect of the state of Pakistan was clarified by Quaid-e-Azam in his famous presidential address to the Constituent Assembly on 11th August 1947, when he proclaimed, "You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques or to any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state. We are starting with this fundamental principle that we are all citizens and equal citizens of one state." Now I think we should keep that in front of us as our ideal, and you will find that in the course of time, Hindus would cease to be Hindus and Muslims would cease to be Muslims, not in the religious sense, because that is the personal faith of each individual, but in the political sense as citizens of the state. The state of Pakistan claims itself to be Islamic, firstly because it is founded on Islam as deen, as distinguished from mazhab, a body of Islamic principles which are for universal application. These principles are that sovereignty belongs to God alone, and the authority which He has delegated to the state of Pakistan through its people is to be exercised within the limits prescribed by Him, that the authority delegated to the state is a sacred trust, that the state must endeavor to achieve the ideals of equality, solidarity, freedom, and justice among all its citizens, that its constitution must be democratic, for it must exercise its powers and authority through the chosen representatives of the people, that it must guarantee man's inalienable and fundamental rights, equality of status and of opportunity, equality before law, freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, association, assembly, movement, trade, business or profession, and the right to hold and dispose of property subject to law and public morality, that it must secure the complete independence of the judiciary and uphold the supremacy of rule of law. Each of these principles can be directly traced from the Quran and Sunnah. The following statements of Quaid-e-Azam reiterate the very same principles. "It is my belief that our salvation lies in following the golden rules of conduct set for us by our great lawgiver, the Prophet of Islam. Let us lay the foundations of our democracy on the basis of truly Islamic ideals and principles. Our Almighty has taught us that our decisions in the affairs of the state shall be guided by discussions and consultations." Speech, Sibbi Darbar, 14th February 1948. Brotherhood, equality and fraternity of men, these are all the basic points of our religion, culture and civilization. And we fought for Pakistan because there was a danger of denial of these human rights in this subcontinent. Speech, Chittagong, 26th March 1948. The theory of Pakistan guarantees that federated units of the national government would have all the autonomy that you will find in the constitutions of the United States of America, Canada, and Australia. But certain vital powers will remain vested in the central government, such as the monetary system, national defense, and other federal responsibilities. Each federal state or province would have its own legislative, executive, and judicial systems, each of the three branches of government being constitutionally separate. Interview, Associated Press of America, 8th November 1945. The Constitution of Pakistan has yet to be framed by the Pakistan Constituent Assembly. I do not know what the ultimate shape of this Constitution is going to be, but I am sure that it will be a democratic type, embodying the essential principles of Islam. Today, they are as applicable in actual life as they were 1300 years ago. Islam and its idealism have taught us democracy. It has taught equality of man, justice and fair play to everybody. We are the inheritors of these glorious traditions and are fully alive to our responsibilities and obligations as framers of the future Constitution of Pakistan. Recorded broadcast, February 1948. Secondly, the state of Pakistan is Islamic for the reason that although it is committed to promote the material advancement and welfare of all its citizens like an ideal secular state, it is also its duty to endeavor to promote the moral and spiritual advancement and welfare of its Muslim citizens. This does not in any way imply that there are grades or classes of citizenship in Pakistan. For all practical purposes, such conditions do not exist. Since Muslims constitute a large majority, they have the right to demand that constitutionally the head of the state of Pakistan must belong to the majority community. Even this is merely symbolic, for in a federal parliamentary form of democracy as envisaged by Quaid-e-Azam, the real power vests in the party which commands majority in the assembly. Similarly, they have the right to demand that the state must promulgate such laws and implement such educational system for their children which promoted, besides the material advancement and welfare of all its citizens, the moral and spiritual advancement and welfare of its Muslim citizens, so that Muslims are enabled to order their lives in the individual and collective spheres in accordance with the teachings and requirements of Islam as set out in the Quran and Sunnah. This is also necessary for the preservation of the ideology on which Pakistan is founded. Consequently, the second principle of the ideology of Pakistan as laid down by Quaid-e-Azam is that for Pakistanis, Islam is the basis of their secularism as well as constitutionalism. Islam has its own economic system. Muslims believe that each generation, guided but unhampered by the work of its predecessors, can interpret the Quran according to its needs and requirements. The object of Islam is to establish a balanced economic order based on fundamental human rights, which ensures that no individual can exploit another. It rejects capitalism and communism as two extremist viewpoints and bases its own economic system on the principle of moderation, iqtisad, the maintenance of a correct balance between labor and capital. Therefore, it acknowledges the fundamental human right of private ownership with the proviso that any individual cannot accumulate so much wealth that it becomes a source of exploitation of others. In order to keep the power of capital within specified limits, the Quran forbids the taking of interest, disallows speculation, imposes the law of inheritance and a system of taxation. In addition to the above, for the protection of collective rights, there is a duty imposed on the state to continuously make efforts in providing basic necessities of life such as food, clothing, shelter, education, medical aid, and employment to all its citizens. Thus, for the realization of these objectives, any steps which the state may take shall be considered in accordance with the Quran and Sunnah, so long as these steps are not opposed to or in conflict with the Quranic injunctions. Quaid-e-Azam fully realized that there was no room for capitalism in its generally accepted sense in Islamic society. Accordingly, he was opposed to the adoption of Western capitalist economic system in Pakistan. In his speech at the opening ceremony of the State Bank of Pakistan on 1st July 1948, he proclaimed, "The economic system of the West has created almost insoluble problems for humanity, and to many of us it appears that only a miracle can save it from the disaster that is now facing the world. It has failed to do justice between man and to eradicate friction from the international field. On the contrary, it was largely responsible for the two world wars in the last half century. The Western world, in spite of its advantages of mechanization and industrial efficiency, is today in a worse mess than ever before in history. The adoption of Western economic theory and practice will not help us in achieving our goal of creating a happy and contented people." Similarly, Quaid-e-Azam could not accept the communist ideology, economic theory and practice. While addressing the Punjab Muslim Students Federation at Lahore on 19th March 1944, he proclaimed, "I warn the communists to keep their hands off Muslims. Islam is their guide and complete code for their life. They do not want any isms." Quaid-e-Azam wanted to base the economy of Pakistan on iqtisad, the Islamic economic system, when on the occasion of the opening ceremony of the State Bank of Pakistan on 1st July 1948, he proclaimed, "We must work our destiny in our own way and present to the world an economic system based on true Islamic concepts of equality of man and social justice. We will thereby be fulfilling our mission as Muslims and giving the humanity the message of peace, which alone can save it and would secure the welfare, happiness, and prosperity of mankind." In reply to a question as to what would be the economic policy of Pakistan, in an interview to a representative of the foreign press on 8th November 1945, he said, "You are asking me to interpret what the government will do, but personally I believe that in these modern days, essential key industries ought to be controlled and managed by the state. That applies also to certain public utilities. But what is a key industry and what is a utility service are matters for the lawmakers to say, not for me." If the views of Quaid-e-Azam are explained in the light of modern terminology of economics, he contemplated an order for Pakistan based on mixed economy, an economy which permits individual enterprise within specified limits and side by side it implements the principle of state control. There are statements of Quaid-e-Azam, for instance his address to the Karachi Chamber of Commerce on 27th April 1948, in which he enumerated the industries then reserved for management by the state as consisting of arms and munitions of war, generation of hydropower, and manufacture of railway wagons, telephone, telegraph, and wireless apparatus, whereas all other industrial activity was left open to private enterprise, which, according to him, would be given every facility a government could give for the establishment and development of industry. Similarly, there are his statements, for instance his speech on the occasion of the laying of the foundation stone of the building of a textile mill on 26 September 1947, in which he insisted on private sector to provide for proper residential accommodation and other amenities for workers and laborers, because, according to him, no industry could thrive without contented labor. But it is obvious that Quaid-e-Azam desired to give the power to the national and provincial assemblies to determine as to which more basic or key industries or public utilities should be brought under state control and which should be left open to private enterprise. Therefore, according to him, it were only the representatives of the people who could make laws concerning the extent of land holdings and nationalization or denationalization of a particular basic or key industry or a public utility in accordance with the collective needs and requirements of the community. According to Quaid-e-Azam, the establishment of such an economic order would facilitate the realization of the ideals of Islamic social justice, equality, and brotherhood of man. In order to distinguish Islam from the atheistic socialism of Pandit Nehru, he once termed Islamic economic system as Islamic socialism. Speech, Chittagong, 26 March 1948. But by the use of this expression, he meant nothing more than what he intended to mean. Quaid-e-Azam was aware that the object of the economic teachings of Islam is to realize the ideals of equal distribution of wealth and a classless society through the politico-moral principles of equality, brotherhood, justice, and evolution, with the consent of the people secured through democratic means and not through class hatred, violence, destruction, and revolution. The ultimate aim of iqtisad is to bring into being a welfare state of the middle class, because according to the Islamic moral code, the respectability of a person depends on the nobility of his character and not on his wealth or poverty. Hence, the object of the economic teachings of the Quran is to provide facilities for the have-nots so that they could achieve the living standard of the middle class, and to impose restrictions on the haves so that they could not step beyond middle class. This is precisely what is meant by iqtisad, the only method which, according to Islam, is easy and practicable. A community which believes in iqtisad, moderation, in the sphere of economics must naturally pursue neutralist foreign policy and foreign trade. The principles of Pakistan's foreign policy were laid down by Quaid-e-Azam in February 1948 when he proclaimed, "Our foreign policy is one of friendliness and goodwill towards all the nations of the world. We do not cherish aggressive designs against any country or nation. We believe in the principles of honesty and fair play in national and international dealings and are prepared to make our utmost contribution to the promotion of peace and prosperity among all the nations of the world." The ideology of Pakistan, when approached in the light of Quaid-e-Azam's statements, is simply this, that Islam is a complete code of life for Muslims. It is the source of their spiritual, moral, as well as temporal values, and so long as Islam is the basis of Pakistani nationalism, patriotism, secularism, constitutionalism, there is a chance of our survival as a people. If this basis ceases to exist, Pakistan shall be no more what it is. All these isms are creations of human mind. They are trends of human thought moving in different directions, opposing one another, and in constant conflict with each other. Islam has the capability of assimilating, absorbing, embracing, and dominating all these isms. Islam does not restrict the movement of Pakistanis in any of these directions. It only controls and guides them. And so long as Islam is there to provide the guidance, there will be coherence and consistency in our movement, irrespective of the direction we may take. This is precisely the reason why Quaid-e-Azam had declared that Muslims did not need any isms and that Islam was their guide and complete code for their life. Thank you.
Dr. Javed, you have told us that once in Chittagong, the Quaid-e-Azam used the term Islamic socialism in contradiction of the atheistic socialism of Mr. Nehru, may I ask you that can we use this term in the connotation of Islamic social justice as it was in the mind of our Quaid?
Now, as for socialism, we know very well that in the phase in which Quaid lived, there of course was a much hullabaloo about socialism of Pandit Nehru. Therefore, you notice that Quaid-e-Azam, for instance, all the time, of course, as I have mentioned the statements of Quaid-e-Azam before you, in which, of course, if you were to study his statements collectively, you would probably arrive at the conclusion that in his mind, his concept was of realizing the ideal of Islamic social justice. If he used the expression Islamic socialism, it was for no other purpose except to distinguish Islam from atheistic socialism of Pandit Nehru. At the same time, he also wanted to tell, rather particularly to bring it home to the Muslims at that time, who were probably swayed by these new ideas, that within Islam, within the framework of Islam, they had everything which they could realize, and they need not borrow or they need not depend on terminology which was foreign or alien to their own cultural tradition.
Quaid-e-Azam Memorial Lectures. In this series of fortnightly broadcasts, you've just heard the third talk